We're going to start off with a conversation that is continuing here as we started to dig into a pet shop here in the Charlotte area that has been shut down. We reported several days back that Happy Puppy Universe in North Charlotte had its license revoked by the state after multiple violations, including puppies that died in this shop's care. The fact that, according to authorities, this shop was also selling sick dogs to folks without disclosing any sort of medical conditions. And we later found out from a local rescue, which took on some of these dogs after the shop closed, that some of these dogs reportedly came from puppy mills. So really beckoning the question here of what is going on with these puppy mills? How big of an issue is this? And what do folks need to know if this is something that they stand against and want to put a stop to these puppy mills? We've got John Goodwin, who's joining us with Humane World for Animals. John, you are leading up efforts to essentially put a stop to puppy mills nationwide. We thank you so much for joining us here on Live Impact News.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's a topic that is sitting not great with a lot of folks in our community. Gotten a lot of response on social media following, the headlines that we just discussed with this pet shop. And I think folks might not know how prevalent puppy mills are perhaps in the United States and where some of these dogs might end up. It doesn't always look like a puppy mill, but you might have shops that are taking them in, seemingly so. This was a case we had puppies that were reportedly from Missouri.
Yeah, so the vast majority of puppies sold in pet stores do come from puppy mills, and Missouri is the #1 puppy mill state in the nation. That's where the most are. And the Midwest and all the states around Missouri have a lot of puppy mills as well. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't any in North Carolina. There are plenty in North Carolina as well. But the epicenter for the puppy mill industry is in the Midwest. Now, as far as the puppy stores go, and that's been the big controversy in North Carolina, as a rule of thumb, high volume pet breeders are going to rely on high volume pet retailers are going to rely on high volume pet breeders to keep those glass display cases filled at all times. No pet store owner wants to have a Rolodex with 400 responsible breeders calling through, seeing who has a litter available now. No, they want to go to someone that has 50 or 60 breeding dogs of all different types who can keep those glass display cases filled all the time. So that's why the pet stores are usually selling puppy mill puppies.
Now, I mean, for folks who aren't familiar with the conditions inside these puppy mills, can you speak to, what you and your team have seen or gotten reports of as far as what is it like for dogs inside these facilities?
So I think the best way to answer that is to describe what the USDA standards for USDA licensed so-called commercial breeding kennels look like. Because when you go into one of these puppy stores, they will use the fact that the breeders are USDA licensed as part of their sales pitch. But what they're not telling people is that the USDA regulations allow for puppy mills to keep dogs in cages that are only 6 inches longer than their body. I mean, we're talking about dogs, maybe a Yorkshire Terrier kept in a cage the size of a dishwasher. They allow these breeders to keep dogs in wire cages. Their paws may never touch a blade of grass. The sun may never touch the back of the dog. They allow them to breed them every heat cycle until their bodies wear out, and they can even legally kill the dogs when they're no longer productive breeders. And those are the conditions that are allowed by USDA. There are a lot of these facilities that fall below those bare minimum survival standards. So basically, I would say that puppy mills are kind of like puppy factory farms.
What are you and your team doing to try to, tackle this from a policy perspective? Because as you pointed out, in some of these cases, they're within the regulations. Obviously, you mentioned not all the cases, but in some of the cases, they are within, the legal ramifications. But you seemingly want to change that. I mean, that's what I'm hearing kind of more or less from you.
Yeah. So for years, we worked on trying to get the standards of care for the dogs in puppy mills improved. We did a rulemaking petition to the USDA urging them to improve the standards of care for the dogs. We did bills in Congress. We went state by state. But here's the fundamental problem. The states with the most puppy mills are states that have large agricultural economies. And in those states, big agribusiness is disproportionately powerful. And there are people in big ag that have blocked laws that would protect dogs in puppy mills because they're afraid that if a dog in a puppy mill is given higher standards of care, then heaven forbid, next thing you know, we'll have to improve standards of care for farm animals. And they just don't want to go down that road. So we decided, okay, you know what? If we have to push a boulder up a hill to get an extra square inch of space for a dog in a puppy mill in Arkansas, probably not worth our time. But instead, they've got to sell these dogs somewhere. So we've been working to stop the sale of puppies in pet stores, and we've gotten 8 states and over 500 localities to ban the sale of puppies in pet stores just during the last 10 years. And that has led to a sharp reduction in the number of dogs kept in these puppy mills.
Now, you mentioned earlier the fact that while these puppies in this specific case that I just referenced came from Missouri, that doesn't mean that there aren't puppy mills in North Carolina. I'm just curious if you're aware of either mills in either of the Carolinas. I ask that because here in Charlotte, we're right on the state line. We kind of basically are right near both of the Carolinas, if you will, so we take an interest in policies and decision-making that happens in both states. And if you're aware or unaware of puppy mills, what are the general animal welfare rules in the Carolinas, and where do you think they might rank in comparison to other states?
Well, there are puppy mills in North Carolina, and there have been a lot that have been shut down by law enforcement because the conditions dropped below what is allowed under the state's animal cruelty statutes. But the state animal cruelty law is not a substitute for a good puppy mill law, and I'll explain why. To enforce a criminal statute like an animal cruelty law, a sheriff or a police department needs to have probable cause that some sort of cruelty is happening on a property. Otherwise, they cannot enter the property to see for themselves what's going on. And so we pushed for there to be laws that regulate puppy mills and set standards of care for the dogs so that the people who have one of these commercial dog breeding facilities has to acquire a license, which then gives the State Department of Agriculture or some other regulatory agency the permission to come in and inspect to make sure that the standards are where they should be. North Carolina doesn't have anything like that on the books, neither does South Carolina. So that's been a bit of a problem. Back when, my gosh, it's been about 15 years, there was a big push to try to get a good, strong law tackling the puppy mill problem passed in North Carolina, but unfortunately, it didn't get anywhere in the state legislature.
I mean, I've covered, multiple animal welfare topics here in the Carolinas. We've done a lot of reporting here at WCNC Charlotte on dog fighting and animal cruelty cases, and we kind of hear similar, I guess, takes when it comes to trying to get policy through regarding, some of these important issues for animal advocates. Do you think that, you kind of alluded to this before, here in the Carolinas, it is a similar situation of if there is a strong agricultural, economy, tied in with ag, that there might be a lot of folks who are lobbying against these types of policies here in the Carolinas?
There are, and believe it or not, one of the biggest opponents of stronger laws to tackle the puppy mill problem is actually the AKC, the American Kennel Club, who has a headquarters in North Carolina. They have been a major obstacle to getting better protections enacted for dogs. And that surprises a lot of people. And they ask, well, why? Why would the AKC not want to do anything about puppy mills? Well, think about it. The AKC is a dog registry. Who's going to provide more puppies to be registered? Granny, the responsible breeder who has 1 litter of pugs a year, or the puppy mill that's producing 1,000 puppies a year? Well, of course, that massive operation is going to be getting a lot more puppies registered, so they have more influence on the direction that some organizations take who frankly should know better and frankly should be helping us get protections in place for the dogs.
Where do you go from here? And I guess in the sense of, with your efforts to try to change policy, what would you say to folks who are watching here at home about perhaps how they could make their voices heard, however they feel about the topic, whether they're, for or against changes? How would you recommend that they go about making sure that their voices are heard?
Well, if they're against changes that would help the dogs, I think the best thing they can do is just stay home and not say anything. I'm half joking. Now, I think that this is something where the vast majority of people believe that something has to change, something has to give. And I encourage people to study the issue at humaneworld.org/puppy mills. You can learn a lot about the issue. There is a book written by an author named Rory Kress that is called The Doggy in the Window. I recommend that book for anyone who really wants to master the puppy mill issue. And then from there, use your voice, use your social media platform, use any connection you have to raise awareness and help people who are looking for a new dog to join their family, help them find a good, humane, responsible alternative to a retail sales outlet that sells puppy mills. That might be helping them find the perfect animal with a shelter or a rescue. Or if they have their heart set on an 8-week-old purebred puppy of some type, helping them find a responsible breeder who's proud to introduce you to the mother dog and show you where the mother dog lives. Puppy mills won't do that. So there are a lot of things people can do. And also, if you walk into a store, a puppy store, and you see that that they've got those big rows of puppies and all that, walk out the door. That is one of the worst places that you can get a puppy from, both because you're going to be supporting a puppy mill most likely, and also because many of those puppies are sick, and families who purchase puppies in those stores often end up with large veterinary bills immediately.
Why is this such an important topic to you? Why have you, I guess, made this your niche, your calling to work on this specific issue?
I think anybody that's ever had a dog and really, had a good relationship with their dog knows of the undying loyalty and just the pure love that a dog gives you. And then for us to turn around and put dogs in tiny cages and treat them like breeding machines and treat them like they're just agriculture commodities to pop out more puppies to sell, that's a betrayal. And so that bothers me. And I have seen puppy mills, I've been to puppy mills, and I've seen dogs. I remember one, it was actually in North Carolina that we went into with some law enforcement. And they had these little teacup poodles, these little mini poodles. And they were in these tiny little cages. And there was nothing that they could do to burn off their energy. So they would just spin in circles over and over and over again. They just become neurotic from the confinement. And there was so much animal waste that had accumulated in that building that it was burning my eyes and lungs. And I had to leave the building every 5 minutes to get fresh air while our rescue team helped the sheriff's department remove some of the dogs. And I can't forget that. There's so much suffering there, but this is something that we can fix. This is an issue where there are solutions and there's bipartisan support for ending puppy mills. We've got Republicans and Democrats, that a lot of whom agree on this. So I feel like it's a good place to put my energy because I think we can prevail.
I just think about, the picture that you painted just now, and it sounds horrific, and I've not, made this a secret. I've shared this every time we talk about animal welfare stories, but I volunteer at our local animal shelter, and we've seen, and granted, we don't know that these are puppy mill dogs. They could be backyard breeders, but we've seen the mother dogs get brought in, at the end of their childbearing years, if you will, after being bred over and over and over, and just essentially of no more use to their owner and just dumped like they're garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because when people talk about puppy mills, they usually think of the puppy. And why wouldn't they? I mean, puppy mills has the word puppy in it, but the puppy at least gets to leave the puppy mill after 8 weeks. It's the mother dog, it's the father dogs. They're the ones who will spend, 6, 7, 8 years in those cages, just getting bred over and over again. And you mentioned the relinquished breeding dogs that come into some of the shelters. I imagine a lot of them were pretty shut down and required a lot of TLC to kind of get them to a place where they were, ready to go into a good home. I do encourage people to adopt those dogs and give them a second life, but you've got to be patient with them because some of these dogs have never walked on stairs or gone through door frames. And so you'll put them in a house and it's like a whole new experience to them. And you got to be patient because some of them will shut down and it takes a little while for them to get adjusted.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a road to recover, if you will, from a situation like that when they are able to make it out of that situation. John, is there anything else you'd like to leave our viewers with before we wrap things up here?
I know that there are people who have gone into the puppy stores and gotten a puppy, didn't know better, and many times they ended up paying a price because they were sold a sick puppy and they ended up with a terrible, terrible experience. And if that's you, I would ask if you would consider going to humaneworld.org/puppy complaint and letting us know about it.
That's an interesting resource to know about for sure. I mean, just talking about the headline that we mentioned here out of our area, we know of folks, who've basically come forward and said that they had a puppy pass away from this particular pet shop right after they basically purchased that puppy. John Goodwin, thank you so much for joining us once again with Humane World for Animals. And as you mentioned, John, folks can learn more about those advocacy efforts over on your website, Humane World for Animals. Discussion certainly to be continued, of course. And we'll just remind folks here at home watching on Live Impact News that our role in investigating in this story is not done. Our team does continue to look into paper trails and documentation and everything that is coming out of this ongoing saga, because as we've mentioned with some of our more recent reporting, apparently the owner of this particular pet shop in Charlotte also owns a shop in Nashville, Tennessee, also had a shop shut down in the Clearwater, Florida area. So certainly many more threads to pull on.